teams. So you're talking about teams, and I think there's been a lot of conversation about teams in some of our questions we got later. And so my question for you is, how are you doing your best, or how are you leading your teams to stay connected, to stay like in touch with each other? Because those dynamics produce good work, good creative work as well, right?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to something you need anyway, which is really good structure. So we are quite organized in a structural perspective, because people are divided into teams and they report into a board director who has a specific expertise, and the people who, and the team sit underneath that. So we have 4 teams already. And what we've put in place during lockdown is ways for those teams to connect on a really regular basis. And we also realized that people kind of need a beginning and end of their day. So we put in place quite early on, first meetings in the morning. So everyone got a sort of starting point. We have a staff meeting every week. We have remote brainstorming sessions. So it kind of, you have to, we didn't change the structures, but we allow those structures to live virtually. And every Thursday we have drinks, and someone else from the team hosts the drinks, and they often do quizzes or whatever. So, and as for the board, from my level, my team, I have 8 on my board, and we have weekly meetings on money and team and resource. And then we have, every 2 weeks, we have a board meeting for 2 hours. So actually we're probably not doing anything hugely different that we would in the office, but we are adding in just a couple of extra sessions for people to feel there's a beginning and end to their day, so they can start in the morning and know what, at an individual organic team level, they know what jobs they're doing that day, and then they can check in at the end of that day to say how they've managed and how they survived. But the other challenge, which is the flip side of this, is that we are now having to look at Zoom-free areas of the day, because everyone's just on Zoom all the time. So, you're actually almost connecting too much, which is actually really interesting. We would not have predicted that. So people need some time to actually sit and do the work they've just been talking about doing. So the balance is shifting the whole time.
No, thank you for that. That was actually really insightful. You said a couple of gems in there. You have weekly meetings on money. I remember we started doing this at Community maybe last year, and it changed everything. It changed the cash flow. It changed how we spent money. It changed how we planned for everything, because we always knew what was coming in and out of who we owed. And so I don't know if anyone's taken that as a private note, but have weekly updates with yourself on money. Check your bank account every week and ask yourself what you're doing. I think it's just purely essential, because cash right now is king or queen, or cash is ruler right now, to be honest. And if you don't have it, and if you don't have a good management of it, I think it can do you a really bad disservice. So as a point, I just want to highlight and emphasize on that. Moving on though, Karen, I've got a question for you. You said something in your opening when you said you proactively stay in touch with your clients, and you made a concerted effort to really go out and meet those people and connect with them. But how did you go about that? Because many people may be experiencing, oh, my business was furloughed, or the business you were talking to may have been furloughed, or the business you may have been talking to may have been hit a situation that they can't now do business. So how do you go about making those steps to connect with those people?
Well, I mean, one of my companies, actually one of my largest companies, 90% of their business had been affected by COVID. In fact, they run the skies basically. So obviously, with the commercial flights ceasing, and although there were some cargo flights, some of those flights also reducing, it meant that 90% of their business had been impacted. But because we have a relationship with them, it was important then to stay in touch. And it's just staying in touch in terms of, well, some of them we had things that were planned for, during this period of time that were supposed to be face-to-face delivery, offering them different options around, well, we can do some stuff online. Is there, if there are people, because we also do things like resilience training. And that's been quite key. So thinking about it now with the world that we're changing in, as Jane was saying, evolving how you operate as a business, individuals are going to respond differently. So one of our resilience training helps people to look at the different characteristics around resilience and which ones that they use and how they use them. And then the ones that they kind of either underuse, help them to then use those and leverage them and do them in a different way. So if you're naturally, you know, Jane and I both have we've got senior roles. So even though we're introverted, and it comes to a situation where we are speaking in different forums or speaking with senior leadership, we still thrive. It's not that we don't enjoy being around people. I think probably it's the one-to-one that you probably cherish the most, but you do still thrive in that environment simply because you have coping mechanisms, because you put those in. So what you have to do is have a better understanding of who you are, how you respond to different things. So if you are naturally an optimistic person, there is something that is said about being too over optimistic, because if you're too over optimistic, you don't consider the risks. Mm-hmm. So there is about making sure that there's, you know, not saying to someone, don't be optimistic in a situation, but what you need to do is consider some of the risks as well. And that's not to say, you know, the same way as somebody who is pessimistic, that you shouldn't always kind of go to the negative space first, but to consider possibly what some of the positives are around that. And I think that's absolutely key. So when we're speaking to clients, some of the things that we have kind of weaved into our communication, and this is something I would say to anyone who's got a business, is that understand how to do your nurturing communication. Jane's going to be a better expert than me around this, because she spent her world doing this, but it's something that I've definitely learned over time, that there is something about nurturing your customers. So every communication you have with them, it can't be about sales. It's got to be about what is the value, how are you doing, what are some of the things that's happening in your world. Make sure you go onto your clients' websites. Understanding your clients is key. So understanding when they have change of leadership, because, you know, then having a bit of a research about what that leadership style that person had before, so that you can then think about, okay, so based on what we've seen them historically do at other organizations, as they've come to this one, they're more than 9 times out of 10, they're about to make a massive change in this other organization. So how is your business going to respond to this new leadership challenge that this organization is going to have? That's kind of one of the things. That's just kind of a small tip in terms of doing things around that. But making sure that you keep up to date with their press releases, so you know what challenges they're going through. So that thing about understanding what cash flow, understanding finances, understanding them merging, or whatever the case may be, all of these things will have an impact on the service or the products that people are going to be able to consume from you. So regardless of what type of business it is, those are some of the key things to do. I have alerts that come, on a weekly basis of all changes of leadership of different types of companies, because I specialize in transformation. So of course I know there are going to be changes. So, we have to be able to do that. And sometimes it might be to send them, just congratulations on your new position, etc. And then you might say, well, here's a little bit of literature for you to read, just in case you're thinking about these spaces, etc. Whatever the case may be, whether or not, it doesn't necessarily, for me, industries is irrelevant. Transformation is transformation regardless of the spaces. But just to say, I also have a number of other businesses. My portfolio is quite diverse. So I'm just, lockdown for me has allowed me to create a new business. So I have a completely new business with one of my children. And that's literally launching in a week's time. But that's allowed us in the space of 2 months to create the whole thing around that, and to teach my daughter how to create and stand up a business. So as a startup. So everything from the marketing and communication, the packaging that was required, negotiating with suppliers on price and everything. And one of the things I also taught her was not necessarily, what I didn't want her to do is to overly take advantage of the situation we're in, if you get what I mean, because we want to make sure that there is enough that both we as a business are going to make some profit, but also the suppliers we're going to be working with also make profit. So we think about long-term relationships. So everyone that I've communicated with, we've been very transparent. So I helped sort of craft the initial copy, which would say, we are looking to use your products within our service. you know, and we see that you've got it at this price. We're curious to understand what price you could offer us. Now, sometimes they come back with something that's competitive, which allows us to still make the margin that we require, but sometimes they don't. So what we do then is be a little bit more transparent and say, well, here's our costs. And that's really important. Understanding what your cost to serve is.
Mm-hmm.
So calculating your cost to serve is everything from your packaging, your products, your marketing, your packaging and posting, actual postage itself. And then for me, I think 9 times out of 10 in my businesses, it's to try and make at least 40% profit on whatever it is in terms of service. Now, initially, that might not necessarily be the case because you might be buying smaller volumes of things. So, of course, you know, the price is more. So if you're buying, for instance, 10 boxes, then, you know, they might cost you £30 for those boxes. But if you're buying 100 boxes, you know, you're going to get a significant more production. Yeah. So it's understanding those things and building them up. So understanding your initial costs might be more than what your future costs may be.
Karen, thank you so much. That was actually very helpful. When you were talking about, it doesn't actually have to be complicated, but you can actually just go and have a real human conversation with someone and just talk to them and say, this, how are you doing? How's Corona? I don't know, but have a real human conversation. That's a really great way of nurturing and keeping the bond with a client. And I think that's really interesting to articulate, because I'd never thought about it like that. Also, I want to just tell everyone that Saturday School does have all of those toolkits and materials available, right? So you were talking about, you helped one of your children spin up a business. Just for everyone else who may not have a Karen in their life, Saturday School does have all these hints, tips and tools available to you. You mentioned helping your daughter set up a business. Excellent. I'm doing that with my 10-year-old sister. She loves the idea of setting up a lip gloss and clothing business with her big brother. What advice would you give on how to structure that process for someone younger?
Okay, I guess for someone younger. So I took also my son all the way through university with a business as well. So one of the things for him, I made sure that he was doing business and marketing. Mm-hmm. And I said, in order for you to have advantage when you come out, you need to have practical experience. Mm-hmm. So what we did is we set up a business for him to be able to apply all of his learning whilst he was going through university. So if I'm thinking about for a younger person, it is about giving them really simple templates for them to follow. So if you're thinking about from the startup perspective, you put, what does finance look like for our business? You know, again, you know, those very basic things of having, so I have we've created some automated calculators and things. So you just put in your numbers and it pretty much tells you what your cost to serve is, but it has all the categories in there. And if you let a small, young person, sort of play with that, and they say, oh, well, I saw that thing for £10. We're going to make money off that for £10. You say to them, well, actually, if you put it into the calculator, what does that do? How does that work? So I think for somebody younger, if you've got something great, you automate some of the processes to help them, to support them through it. Mm-hmm. Be very clear about, I think, having an index in terms of different references. So what does this word mean? Mm-hmm. So my son he was taxed from the time he was 5 years old. So pocket money was taxed. So, he knew he was going to get a certain amount. So it would be, oh, Mum, you said I was going to get £3. Why have I only got £2? I said, because the tax man has it. So he's grown up with unfortunately, dislike of the tax man. But I put that aside for him, but it was just to show him. And when he was younger, one of the things before we were using the internet the way we did was to search for jobs and roles, we were looking in the newspapers. Mm-hmm. And he got to a point where he understood. He'd look into a newspaper, he'd see a salary on there, and he was able to say to me, well, Mum, that says £40,000 on there, but you're only going to get £30,000 from there because it's a 25% that you're going to get, including your national insurance and your tax. That is critical. So teaching them really early, what does it take? One, to run your household. That's important. And how did I do that? On the fridge, And a lot of his friends learned how much it costs to run a household by looking on my fridge, because I had every single bill laid out on there so that they could see all the detail. So if you start from early, so they have an appreciation of what each pound is spent on, and also time. How do you value your time? What does that mean? I remember I didn't know how much my time was valued at, especially as an interim worker. You don't know whether or not your time's worth £100 a day or it's worth £300 a day, mainly because a lot of times people don't have that sort of network around them. So you have to build your network as well. But being, understanding that over time, your value increases because of your experience. So even if you can do something, within 10 minutes, I'm sure if I said to Jane, can you write me a press release? She could, regardless of how much she might charge me for it, she may be able to do it in an hour. And somebody might say, well, but it only took you an hour to do it. But what I'm paying for Jane is her years of experience. I'm also paying for her any errors that she's ever done in her life that she's learned from.
Lots of those.
Yeah, we've all got, it's all of those things that you're paying for. And I think so when you put a value on either your product, your service, you need to make sure that you take into consideration that, but also make sure that anyone you're engaging with, that you're prepared to pay them a fair price as well. Be fair to them. And if you've got a friend who you could, you think, oh, I'm just going to ask them and I want them to give it to me for free. Have a think about if they are also a small business, how do you think they're going to be making their money? So it's just one of those things to be fair in the whole process and thinking about each other. If that makes sense.
I'm learning more myself, so this is most definitely a mentoring session for me.